Moses is not based on Akhenaten alone. There are some aspects of the Akhenaten story that may make you think that Moses is based on this storyline, but in truth, it's not just Akhenaten, but it's a conglomeration of multiple stories. And we'll break down some of those thought processes on this video. So the idea that Moses and Akhenaten may have one and the same, or the story is based on that, was first pushed by Sigmund Freud. Yes, Sigmund Freud, the psychologist, was the first person who preeminently was saying that Akhenaten was Moses. And this idea flourished during his time frame because people respected his work, thought that he was a genius, and there are some aspects of his work that I do appreciate. But his assumption of Akhenaten being Moses may be because he was a product of his environment at the time frame, that he would believe in this story. And when you believe in something, you want to make history fit it. But the problem is that Akhenaten's existence doesn't go with the Moses story at all. The only similarity that you may think is the fact that Akhenaten uh, practiced and taught monotheism. And for the 17 years he was Pharaoh, Egypt's state religion was monotheism, where the Akhten was the only god and was a supreme deity without form. And it was just represented by the light of the sun. And so with a sun disk. And the reason why I say that it was monotheism, when you look at the Moses story, we are not talking about monotheism here. And this is a trick that many people don't realize. The Moses story, the ancient Israelites believed that their God existed, followed their God, worshiped their God and their God only, according to most of the belief, even though there was a time frame where their God had a wife. But they also believed that everyone else's God existed as well. This is called henotheism. And in henotheism, that's exactly what the belief is. And majority of people were henotheistic. We like to say that these people were polytheistic, these people were polytheistic, but all of them were somewhat polytheistic, henotheistic people. Because the Egyptians would have believed that the Israelite God existed, but they would have worshiped their gods. The Moabites would have believed that the Israelite God existed, but they would have worshiped their God. The Israelites believed that the Moabite god Shamash existed, but they worshiped their God. This is why Shamash defeats Yahweh in a battle that has to deal with Mesha. And you can find this on the Mesha stele, also within your Bible as well. But they believed in these other gods and their existence. This is why Gabriel was getting his ass whooped by the Prince of Persia, and then later had to call his big brother Michael in order to win the battle so he can go and deliver his message to Daniel. These gods existed for them. This is why one of the 10 Commandments says, thou shalt have no other gods before me. This is why in Exodus 34, he says that my name is jealous and I'm a jealous God. He doesn't want you to worship any other gods because of their evils. They were off and worshiping of other gods. You had the uh, event where they killed all these men because they started worshiping the Moabite God because they got some of that Moabite pum pum. That Moabite pum pum, boy, it's undefeated. The pum pum is always undefeated. So Moses didn't practice a monotheism in the same sense that Akhenaten was practicing. So therefore, even their ideas of worship that people try to make similar is completely different. Completely different. The story of Akhenaten doesn't match with Moses. Moses supposedly floated down a river and he was picked up by the Pharaoh's daughter. Akhenaten was born into the royal family. He wasn't supposed to be next in line, but he was born into the royal family. There are some who would try to think that Akhenaten might have been Pharaoh during the time frame of Moses, but the timelines don't match and the events don't match. So what we don't have is a connection between Akhenaten and Moses at all. As a matter of fact, the story of Moses is more akin to the story of Sargon the Great. Sargon was the first emperor, first person that we declare as an emperor. He built the first empire that is recognizable, and that's the Akkadian Empire. Even though the Sumerians had built an empire prior to that, and the Sumerians, Akkadians would flip flop whose rulership, and they worked and lived together. It wasn't until Sargon, who completed the empire from the Persian Gulf all the way up to the Mediterranean that is declared as the first empire. Sargon's story is that he floated down, his parents floated him down a river. The king's baker picked him up. He was raised by the king's baker. He became a cupbearer. He gained the confidence of the Sumerian king, and then he becomes king himself. And that's where the origins of the narratives begin. And Sargon enacted laws in the Akkadian Sumerian Empire, so he was a lawgiver, and so this is the whole story. And he enlarged the kingdom all the way from one sea to the other sea. This huge migration across the desert. That's about it. Beyond that, there's little else. There is other stories about Mises. Mises had a similar story to the Moses story. So what you can see here is that when these Canaanites who left the Canaanites in the Levant and went into the hillside and became Israelites, they began to create their own story. Now, here's the thing. When they left the Canaanites and journeyed across the desert into the hillside of Israel, the Canaanites at that time frame were under Egyptian rule. They were an Egyptian vassal state. When they left and went to the hillside, they exodus from the coastal Israel to the hillside mountainous Israel and set themselves apart, thinking out, leaving the Egyptian rule, setting themselves apart. That little fact right there is what became legendized into the Moses story, and then it became personified by taking bits and pieces of Akhenaten, pieces of Sargon, pieces of Mises, pieces of different stories that had already been told of a people separating or crossing a desert or becoming a lawgiver. And this is what helped them to establish themselves as Hebrews or as Israelites in and around about the 14th to 12th century BCE, which that little episode didn't last long because Pharaoh Meneptah in 1204 came and whooped their ass, and they were only a people. They were a nomadic people that he describes in the Meneptah stele. So no, Moses is not Akhenaten. It's not based solely on Akhenaten, just a little bit, just a little bit. That's about it. So I hope that answers your question, and y'all have a great day. And always remember, you have to free yourself to be yourself because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibrations.